But are we savaging the landscape to satisfy foreign hunger for oil?
This is just about the dirtiest way that you could make oil that we have invented.
Trapped under an area the size of Florida, 174 billion barrels of oil up for grabs. What looks like dense topsoil is actually black gold. Enough unconventional oil to last 100 years. Whoever controls the tar sands controls the world. China is starved for energy. With the world's largest market and fastest growing economy, the only thing that seems capable of slowing down China is their lack of oil. By 2010, China will overtake America as the world's biggest energy consumer. For years, they've been trying to push their way into the tar sands game, betting Alberta can rescue their oil-starved economy. Kang Sheng is a Chinese-Canadian who was a scientist with Syncrude, the biggest tar sands player. Now he's working with the Chinese government. So important is oil to China, they established a University of Petroleum, annually churning out 7,000 graduates, many with expertise in the tar sands. Sheng's renowned for developing cheaper ways to process tar sands crude, and the university is his research base camp.
On the campus here, you have a oil production facility, as well refinery for the student to perform their apprenticeship.
Sheng is experimenting with a cutting-edge chemical process to refine tar sands oil. If it works, tar sands companies won't need to build costly upgraders to sweeten the crude. Sheng's confident his technology could save billions of dollars, enticing potential foreign investors.
This is the typical gas oil material we get from the bitumen upgrader from Fort McMurray.
Shell's Alexander Vandermade is always looking for the next best thing and likes what he sees.
Given the amount of resources they're pouring at it, sooner or later they must be able to succeed. But I would say it's a fast ticking clock. This society is still accelerating. More and more cars are getting on the road. And I've got a feeling if they make it, it's going to be a really narrow escape.
A lot of people seem to be very scared about changes. But on the other hand, Chinese just love to have changes. Chinese just love the crisis. And Chinese always believe it's the crisis that will make a big difference. This is where you're going to make prosperity.
The entry point may be Sheng's technology, but China's ultimate goal is to own a piece of the tar sands and build a Rocky Mountain pipeline to the Pacific. But not all welcome them, fearing an aggressive competitor. Increasingly, oil is a closed market, with 90% of conventional reserves controlled by nationally owned companies. These companies, as in Venezuela and Russia, often have their own geopolitical agendas.
Large majority of those reserves that are nationally owned are in countries that are somewhat unstable, sometimes real unstable, and potentially unfriendly to the West.
Are Canadians just along for the ride?
I think it is a critical question. Do we have any sovereignty at all in terms of our energy sector? Because it is majority foreign owned. And interestingly, a lot of the companies involved now, and increasingly so, are national oil companies or publicly owned oil companies from nations that have chosen to maintain that sovereignty over their own resources, which is very ironic that Alberta and Canada haven't got that kind of public ownership in Alberta's oil sands at all. There's a big difference between being an energy colony and an energy superpower.
Everyone wants a piece of the tar sands, yet Alberta continues to charge one of the lowest oil royalty rates in the world.
Albertans are trying to say, well, we just want to give this energy to you guys and sell it as quick as we can, and we're kind of in liquidation mode. And that's where we have not been very smart.
There's this perception both inside and outside of Alberta that it's raining money. There's a large portion of Albertans that are actually worse off because of the incredible inflation that this province is experiencing. And that applies to the high homelessness rates. We have the highest number of working poor using food banks. And people on fixed incomes, they're not getting cost of living increases. So their incomes are actually falling at the height of a boom.
It wasn't supposed to be this way. Once called Alberta's blue-eyed chic, Peter Lougheed nurtured the tar sands for years. He carefully limited growth and raised royalty rates, establishing a heritage fund with the windfall. Today, with the Heritage Fund no larger than when he left office 23 years ago, and development out of control, Lougheed worries his dream has become a nightmare.
The surface mining takes a huge bite out of the area. It's like stripping the topsoil off a farm. You do that and you've got to think about the future. People have to remember that the oil sands are owned by the people. They're not owned by the oil companies.
Welcome to Norway's oil country. They do things differently here than in Alberta. Norway's ship came in when they discovered oil in the North Sea in 1969, changing their country forever. Stig Bergseth has been with Statoil for 34 years and intimately understands the company's gospel of contained growth. Norway established the publicly owned oil company in 1972, controlling the nation's resource and reaping the benefits of the boom. Stig returns from Alberta on a mission to buy into the tar sands. Statoil can afford to expand abroad. Instead of cashing in their oil lottery winnings, they invested in Norway's future.
One thing that was concerning us, that a country could get too much money and destroy its economy. And as you know, some years ago, we had a decision in the parliament to establish this oil fund, or what is now called the pension fund, so that most of the money coming in from the oil activity is kept outside the natural economy of Norway.
Rather than bust out, Norway matured gracefully. It's quietly grown into the world's second wealthiest country, and little Norway's oil fund is $380 billion, ensuring their progressive society will flourish for generations.
I'm not going to give you an advice to Alberta unless they come and ask for it. But in my experience, you cannot have resources of this size and have a successful development unless you have a good combination of public control and private enterprise.
There's still someone out in the cold, the rest of Canada.
Prime Minister Harper calls Canada the energy superpower, but what we're doing is exporting oil and gas.
Oh, Canada, our home and nation. In the tar sands game, there are inevitably winners and losers.
The boreal forest is a loser. Water users in Alberta are losers. And democracy itself is a loser in not just in Alberta, but also in Canada. Because the more a nation becomes dependent on a single resource, such as oil, the less democratic it comes over time. Oil begins to make the decisions. You introduce these incredible political imbalances to the system that slowly and incrementally change the very character of your democracy.
Oh.